If she does WebEx on his computer, so she doesn't need to use it, and then just does the left dais input to pass this, and then
WebEx running off of it now needs to go for now. What was this file pulled up from? Stick or something?
it's on the ship. It's on the
Share. It created already. Public.
public
Can
meeting.
you open?
You have to now. It was down there away. It's in the files.
You probably just need to toggle back. Easier. Hey, when you come in carrying a box like that, what's in the box? Battle box.
My boy Michael, how are you? I don't know, but I don't have a link to log in to anything.
It wasn't small. I thought it has to do now.
Well, aren't
People should be let in automatically, I think. But if not, there would be a notification somebody's waiting in the lobby.
Oh, is that additional? Is that an additional one?
Yes. We'll let Logan handle that one.
Yeah. Hang out.
And it's formatted as a PowerPoint show, so it's not, you just have to open it and it immediately starts. There's no.
This?
And it will immediately start.
It's the explanation. It's a so it's a slideshow that runs through on a timer.
No. It just, so with PowerPoint, you can either save it as a PowerPoint, which is still formatable, which is the other one that's open. This is saved as a PowerPoint show, so I can still click through it using a mouse or a phone. And it's not scheduled, but it just won't. It's not formatable. It won't show that.
So Alt tab between the three things, both PowerPoint presentations.
And we're unmuted and we're on video right now. So if you're
Guys ready?
video, yeah, sound back on now.
Yeah, we're gonna unmute this guy so that Steven can hear you. If we need to mute it back, obviously we can. If that sounds good. Or we can unmute it at a later point if you want. Probably not. Guess I mute it here until you want a PowerPoint.
You know, I hear you can see it.
We can.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. You need EMS back there?
is it from what's
It's just going.
All right, being 10:30, we'll entertain a motion to return to regular session of the Policy and Governance originally aired July 19th.
Already said motion to reconvene. I will second.
Motion to reconvene.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I think are we under item 7? Discussing possible action regarding proposed projects and programs. All right. We can either go back to the top of the list, or if there's any highlighted projects we need to, let me back up a half step. Sheriff, since you're here, is there items that you want to discuss? Are they 2-hour discussions? All right, whatever projects Sheriff's here for, let's start with that. Oh, Jamie, I didn't notice you standing there. You'll go second.
Oh, no.
All right, I attempted to make the slides large enough everybody could see them from a distance. But because in our last meeting there seemed to be some confusion related to salary and benefit coverage with ARPA funding, I just wanted to walk through the rules a little bit so everybody's comfortable with the specifics as we understand them. So our starting point is very simple. We make the contention that the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office is a public safety agency in duty to the general public of Oklahoma County. It's something everybody, I think, can agree on. Just to make the point that we're a public safety agency, this is the statute, Oklahoma Statute Title 19, Section 516, that confers the duties on the sheriff, undersheriff, and deputies in their service to the general public. Then moving on to the rules. So this is the primary language of the rule that allows for payroll coverage. And this is in the final rule on page 4384 that just says that funds may be used for payroll and covered benefits for public safety employees of recipient government for the portion of the employee's time that is spent responding to COVID-19. And we're just going to kind of walk through that. So we'll start with portion of time. For administrative convenience, the recipient may consider public health and safety employees to be entirely devoted. And this was one of the places I think where there might have been some confusion last week. They can be determined to be entirely devoted to COVID-19 and therefore their full payroll and covered benefits eligible if the employee or his or her operating unit or division is primarily dedicated to responding to COVID-19. And that means that more than half of their time is spent. So that's that 50% number. More than half of their time, then they can be deemed primarily dedicated to, and 100% can be covered. So Treasury goes on to talk about this administrative burden and their concern for it, saying that they've included methods to minimize the administrative burden. Recipients may assess the extent to which staff are dedicated to responding to COVID-19 through a variety of means, including establishing presumptions or assessing public safety staff at the division or operating level. And the example they give in the final rule is that a recipient could consider the amount of time spent by employees in a division, and if the majority of its employees are dedicated to responding to COVID-19, they can determine that the entire division is primarily dedicated to responding to COVID-19. So they're trying to come up with ways to help make that burden a little bit less cumbersome. So we've talked about being a public safety agency. We've established that. And what the opportunities the final rule offers for determining the portion of time that is deemed to be spent responding to COVID. Now let's look at that language, responding to COVID-19. In the interim final rule, published much closer to the passage of the legislation, the Department of Treasury stated that mitigating the impact of COVID-19, including taking actions to control its spread, continues to require a major public health response from state, local, and tribal governments. They then, when the final rule was published, said that preventing and mitigating the spread of COVID-19 continues to require a major public health response from federal, state, local, and tribal governments. For clarity, they say in the final rule that uses of funds to, quote, respond to the public health emergency address the virus itself, support efforts to prevent and decrease the spread of the virus, and address other impacts of the pandemic on public health. I would highlight, and this is for the other folks like me in the room, I would highlight that there is a serial comma in this particular language in the rule. So each one of these items on the list is a unique and independent item, which means that supporting efforts to prevent and decrease the spread of the virus on its own is responding to the public health emergency. Additional language in the rule says that Treasury is clarifying that responding to COVID-19 entails work needed, again, to respond to the public health impacts of the pandemic apart from typical pre-pandemic job duties or workload. They also say that Treasury is further clarifying that when providing COVID-19 prevention and mitigation services, recipients can identify the impacted population as the general public. This language indicates everything we do to prevent the spread of the virus with the general public is part of the impacted population. So now let's connect all the dots. Our presumptions as a public safety agency, which we've established, and duty to the general public, which we've also established. We must include in every public interaction efforts to prevent and decrease the spread of the virus. More than 50% of the employees in each operational unit included in our salary and benefit reimbursement request perform more than 50% of their required tasks in unusual or atypical ways as parts of our efforts to prevent and decrease spread of the virus versus prior to the pandemic. To just really drill the point home, these are the bureaus and divisions that are included in the application as having greater than 50%, and those that we've excluded from the application as having less than 50%. Judicial Services Bureau, Field Services, Training, and our Fleet Division are included in the application. Our Finance, Personnel, and Technology divisions, as well as our Public Information Officer, have all been excluded, and any employee that's paid with federal funds already. We have a couple of grant recipients that they are not included either. But one of the things that I learned that I want to sort of shine a light on in the process of talking with the bureaus and divisions is something that had never occurred to me. We've probably all heard about officers and deputies who were early on in the pandemic spit on or coughed at as COVID became an issue. And what I didn't know was that even today, people are using COVID as a way to try to avoid interactions with law enforcement. In our judicial services team, they show up at a facility, they get the inmate, they get him out to the car. Oh, my aunt came to visit me and, a couple days ago and she has COVID. Or a traffic stop happens. Oh, I have COVID. And in an effort to potentially to prevent the deputy from getting close enough, maybe to smell alcohol on the driver. I have COVID. You don't want to get close enough. So one of the things that means is that for us and our deputies, any interaction they have with the public, they have to make assumptions. They have to make the assumption that the individual they're interacting with has COVID-19, and they have to make the assumption that they might have it. They also then have to go a step further and make the assumption that they might be getting it from that individual, and they might give it to that individual. So everything that we do is about preventing the spread or decreasing the spread of the virus, which is one of the responses to COVID-19. I have some examples specific to our bureau, different bureaus and judicial services. We've changed the materials that we use to post documents on doors because the materials we were using before had a higher likelihood of transferring bacteria, germs, viruses, that sort of thing than what we've changed to. Our deputies also have protective suits that they all have been issued in case they have to go into a house. They can't use some of our changed policies where they verify identities through doors or windows, that sort of thing. They have to go in. They have suits that they are able to put on. and the increased time that takes. Inmate holding at the courthouse just next door throughout the day. Inmates are moved back and forth from Oklahoma County Detention Center to the courthouse. They still have to be pat down. We've increased the number of deputies that are involved in that process because of the separation and the spacing that it takes, the masking, the gloving, all of that sort of thing. Time delays because the inmate could claim a COVID diagnosis. We have to wait for a test to come back before we even put them in the vehicle. We can't transport them to the courthouse and run the risk of spreading the virus here. We also can't transport an inmate back to the detention center and run the risk of them spreading it there. So everything that we do is about preventing or decreasing the spread of the virus. In our Field Services Bureau, the SROs, including the increased number of SROs that we have, they can't just take a student into their office anymore. It's too small a space in most schools. So they have to look for a larger room, sometimes a conference room. There's scheduling issues. Always takes a lot longer to get those sorts of things, planned out than it might have used to take when they could just use their own space. And one of the things when they first mentioned this to me, I thought, well, that's, but when you really think about it, so hand washing. So you're a school resource officer. You're in there with students, some of them young students. Every interaction, just think through your day for a minute and imagine every interaction you have with an individual. After you have that interaction, you go wash your hands. How close are you to the bathroom? Do you have your own executive bathroom? Something we need to think about. And how far away is it? How much time is added to your day? Just because every time, in an effort to prevent the spread or decrease the spread, you're walking back and forth to the bathroom after every interaction. So at first I thought it was an interesting example, but if you really think about it throughout your own day, that time adds up. In patrol, on our traffic stops, vehicles are approached from the passenger side instead of the driver's side now to try to add that distance. Of course, if there's a passenger in the passenger side of the vehicle, then you've got another issue. We don't take the driver's licenses physically from the driver anymore. We ask them to hold the driver's license up. We write the driver's license number down. We take it back to the vehicle. Now they have to key that information in, whereas before they could just drop it in the card reader. Now we've got the increased time where we're keying in these driver's license numbers to run and look and see if they have any issues outstanding. And then, of course, gloves and masks used if the driver needs to be taken into custody. And again, back to that idea that people are almost weaponizing the idea of just the diagnosis of COVID to try to prevent law enforcement to stay at an arm's length. So with all of that, that's just to say that we as a public safety agency believe the employees included in our ask meet the requirements for their payroll and benefits to be covered through the use of the ARPA funding. This is just our mission statement. I always end with that. Questions?
Real quick, was courthouse services in any of those?
Yes.
Okay. That's in the judicial services? Is that
Yes.
where that's at?
Yeah.
And that's for items 00043 and 00044, if I remember
That is
correctly.
correct.
So,
Amongst others, motion to receive this presentation into the record.
second?
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Thank you. Was there anything else?
I believe we have covered every base and every question that has been asked, not only of this respective board, but of censure. I think a portion of it was how do you come to that number, that 50% number? I think that was well displayed today. I would say the level at which we were going to and the information that we can provide to you clearly shows that our intent is very good, and our ability to go out into the public and still provide a service, keep people safe and keep us safe is all there, and it's all laid out for you. So I think we have jumped each and every hurdle that's been presented to us, and we've done that very well. So I don't think there's any other questions left to ask. I don't think there's anything left, up in the air, and I think we're ready to go forward on this. At least out of the P&G arena.
I tend to agree. I think I felt that way the other day. That's why I made the motion for 43 and 44. But, I mean, mostly because I've had the time to sit there and talk with you and go over this. hopefully everybody else is as clear as Andrea made it.
Yes.
And fully understands. But if there's further questions, now would be what's the thoughts of Accenture after this?
I would say I'm a little surprised to see a presentation prior to, we had asked to meet this week, did not get a response. So I'm a little surprised to see a presentation at this point, because there is, as she has noted, an administrative burden that comes along with this. While she may be correct in some of her statements on things have changed in response to COVID, there's a lot of documentation that goes with that, and we don't have any of that. We were trying to set that meeting up to get that information. Our read as your consulting team and as people we've reached out to in the firm also are still in agreement that it's unlikely you're going to get to the 50% or higher number. And while you can read the word response to however the county would like, we will move forward however the county would like. It is apart from regular tasks that were already ongoing prior to the pandemic. So like you were already making traffic stops and things like that. I understand there are additional pieces to that now, and we can take some of that into consideration, but it's going to be very difficult, in our opinion, to get all the way over to the 50% number.
Well, when you're talking about getting over to the 50% number, are you looking at it just from a time aspect? Like it took 20 minutes before and now it's taken 25, so it's not a 50%? Because I don't necessarily think by reading the act that it necessarily talks about just a time frame. I mean, when you're talking about the mental stress and anxiety that are on the deputies when they're approaching these situations, that's not a tangible thing, but it's still there. So I think those things need to be considered. My question at this point, and it's the same thing that I had the other day, I've been tracking this and talking to Andrea, and I was comfortable with the recommendation for your special funds, because I know that's something that's going to impact your agency, because those funds go back in there. You're able to continue to respond to COVID in the community with that money. The general fund dollars, that's not money that's coming back to your agency. That's money that's just coming back to the county. It'd be a little different if that money were going back to your agency and then you were able to respond. But we're talking about bringing the money back into the general fund of the county. I guess my question before wanting to move forward on that is, what's our plan to spend that money? Like I said, on the special fees, the plan is to continue the ongoing efforts that the county sheriff's department is doing to respond to COVID. The money coming back in the general fund, I don't know what we're going to do with that money yet. And I think once we know what we're going to do with that, it would put me in a more comfortable position to be able to make a decision on a recommendation. Does that make sense?
The item at hand with the
But is
budget
that what we're
board.
gonna, is that the intent of?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that we can use with this money. I just throw out the example that we are building a building. I think that's something we can all point to as being an example, because we are the only ones under a time crunch. We got 24 months.
Right.
And so nobody else is going to up and get kicked out, but we very well might. So this definitely affords us the funding for that. But what I would say, to your point from Accenture, I believe the sheriff's offices went above and beyond even Accenture, because we talk about this evidentiary value and how do you come to this and how do you come to that, and you're not prepared to speak. But everything that we have gotten thus far has been on the backs of the sheriff's office, and none of this has been garnered through the office of Accenture. And so I think we're in a better place to speak on it, because I think we're more squared away on the topic.
I don't disagree that. Hey, Steven.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification. I think what we're in disagreement on is the portion of time spent in response to COVID and how we're interpreting that piece of the guidance. So just taking a brief step back, we're going to redesign this position as a multi-step process. So first step is to identify eligible Second is to assess the portion of time spent on COVID-19 response. And this isn't about the impact that the staff may have had or the risk that they face. It's about their response, the time that they spend in response to COVID-19. And it's our position that Treasury's inclusion of this second step deliberately presumes that many of the staff will continue to spend time on duties and activities other than that COVID-19 response, and therefore have asked us to follow that distinction. So that's kind of where we're coming from, is that we just want to be able to demonstrate how are we coming to the conclusion of the portion of time spent. If it 2%, 50%, 100%, the answer doesn't matter necessarily. What's important to us is being able to demonstrate how we got to that number, and that's the information that we're trying to obtain from the department.
To the sheriff's point, obviously their department knows the ins and outs better than we ever could, since we are not within that department. And so they know if a traffic stop was originally taking 5 minutes and now it's taking 20 minutes, like those are things that he's correct. We cannot make that, we can't make an assumption on those things. We do have to get data from our departments to be able to accurately report those things back if we're going to use any forms of justification. So we do have to rely on our departments for information because we're not in them.
So is it your contention that minutes and seconds are the only thing that we can use to evaluate the percentage of time spent? Can we look at the number of tasks, or is it just,
We just need
is it
something that's
simply
data-driven.
is it simply a minute and second
We just need
calculation?
data-driven numbers. Yeah, Stephen?
Yeah, so Andrea made this point earlier about, or maybe Treasury acknowledges the administrative burden of having to go look at time sheets and come up with the hours. That's not necessary at all. That's part of that kind of analysis. But still, we need to be able to demonstrate how we get to the number, even if we're not like getting it, calculating hours. We need to be able to make some assumptions and generalizations about the activity work.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You said you were surprised about a presentation. You've heard the presentation now. With this information that you have, will that help you come to a decision? Is this information that will help you in making that determination?
It is helpful information, but it still doesn't get us from point A to point B. Like, we understand that the department is irreplaceable. We understand that they have put themselves at risk, that they do a lot for this community, and we do not want to disregard that in any means. We support their office and we support these people, but like, I still don't have any numbers on that. Like, I still don't have anything that says it takes longer to do this. Like, we can make some general statements and things like that, but it's not going to be enough to go through an audit report. Like, the presentation, yes, it's helpful. We've heard about how they're can no longer scan the IDs and things like that. And that's useful information, but it has to be more detailed than that in order for it to pass an audit through Treasury.
So, I mean, and I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm trying to really, because it seems like there's a little bit of a chasm there between you guys. I mean, do they need to get stopwatches out?
No, absolutely not. We had hoped to meet this week to avoid this. We had been wanting to kind of come up with what we could say those justifications are. If we can get, if there's 10 new activities, some details on each of those activities, if there's an additional time spent on those activities, if there's been an increase in overtime, like all of these things are things that we have to gather in order to make the justification. And we'd have to do it in any department. This isn't just specific to the sheriff's office. It's any department that's going to ask for salary and benefits or premium pay. There is, to the point, there is an administrative burden that comes with it. And I know it sounds exhausting, and I'm sure like the department is at this point with us, but there are things that we have to meet in order for the county to continue to stay in compliance. And like, we are just trying to protect the sheriff's office. We're trying to protect you guys in making those justifications. And so it would be useful if we could set time to meet with the department to work through that.
So just a quick, easy search here on Google about doing exactly what we're doing. It appears that counties across the country are doing this. What is it that is precluding us from doing this?
I need data. I need more information.
Have you looked at other counties similarly situated and requested from them the type of data that they're using and what their documentation looks like?
So it could depend on how they're equating it, if they're using it out of revenue replacement or if they're using it out of the actual 4-1. So that will influence part of that. We could work with Tulsa. They are a similar county and they've done some allocations, so we can work with them to see what their numbers are. But also, I don't know based off what was looked up if they're asking for 50% to the 100% or if they're asking for less than. Like, I don't know what their justification or argument is based off the Google search.
Well, but it was my understanding that you guys were, I mean, part of the reason why we went with Accenture was the size and scope that you guys have.
Yeah.
Have you guys looked at these other counties? I mean,
Yes, we've been looking at comparable counties, like we did in the Big Ideas report that Nicole gave a couple weeks ago. So we have been looking at comparable counties. I don't know that we drilled in specifically on this portion because we've really still been trying to get through the initial piece of it. Like, we're still trying to get through the nitty-gritty of some of these details in order to even make justifications.
but if there's already been approvals from other counties and you look and see what their justifications were, that can then help you. I mean, we've been at this process for a while. I mean, it's not like we're 2 weeks in. I mean, there's been a lot of time. If you're waiting for them just to get you the information, they don't necessarily know what they don't know. And if you can help facilitate that to figure out what other entities are using, then that might help them be able to satisfy the information that you need.
Understood. I do think that we have made some efforts to set up some time to walk through those things. I do know for a fact that I have sent documentation to them to be filled out that I have not received back.
But that doesn't have anything to do with you reaching out and looking at what other entities have used for justification.
Sure, we
Because
we
I would
still
think
can.
you would have that information, and that's stuff that you would bring to them. I understand you're wanting them to bring you some stuff, but if you can take them some stuff as well, that
We
would
have
probably
provided
be helpful.
examples. Yes, we have previously.
Some of
provided
those
some
counties,
examples.
some of those counties are using that 10 million allocation. Well, we're not going to use that money for this. We're using that money to drop down and to a point where earlier on, the budget board early on said, we're going to do what it takes to get money for the capital fund for the jail. And so a lion's share of these dollars are just that. Once they go to general fund, will be moved over to the capital fund for the construction of the new jail.
Cody, to your point, that's something we can go look into. We have looked into it before. We have provided examples before, to Danny's point. But we can take another look at it. We can go back and look, just in terms of consulting the other teams that are working on ARPA within our firm, that we've done this as well. And the consensus is that our interpretation of measuring the portion of time spent in COVID response is necessary, and that Treasury included it for a reason. So honestly, I don't feel like what we're asking for is a lot. I think we can get to the right number and the number that we're looking for. But it's just a matter of being able to demonstrate that taking this as the Treasury is very deliberate about us.
The sheriff's office would like to speak.
All right, I believe it was end of April, beginning of May. Stephen, you might know. I know I've got it in the timeline that we provided to Chris at one point of all the communication that we attempted to have. And we've been discussing this salary and asking. And I believe I was trying to be on vacation when I had the phone call with you, Stephen. And I said, what do you need me to present to you? and you said, I need you to get to the task level. And if it would took you an hour to arrest somebody before COVID and it takes you 3 hours now, that's what I need to know. That is the administrative burden that the Treasury Department is trying to relax with the rules and the language in the rules that I demonstrated today. I apologize if I missed a communication this week. I don't know if it was an email or a phone call or more of one thing. We were working on putting this together. We've been reaching out for some time trying to get, okay, sit down with us. I carried all of my boxes of stuff over here multiple times and laid everything out and said, help me figure out how we need to do this. And just coming to the meetings and saying, this is what we need, this is what we need to get together, we need to get together. We have gotten together. So now I'm saying we've got our bureaus putting together the documentation that shows this is what we did before COVID, this is what we do now. And it is not, although there is a portion of it that is about keeping our deputies safe, it is not just about that. It is about preventing and decreasing the spread of the virus in the community that we serve. And that 100% is an absolutely appropriate response to COVID, which makes it a done deal. I mean, to your point, Michael, this isn't money that the sheriff's office is necessarily going to benefit from directly, but we're a part of this county. And we see the need, and we want to do everything that we can that's appropriate in this legislation to help the county in every way that we can. And this is one of those ways. And we'll sit down with our Accenture friends and we'll go over it again. But I want it on the record that this is not the first time. If a meeting was missed this week, I apologize, but we have been trying to have this conversation. We have made ourselves as available as possible to have this conversation for months. So I take umbrage at some of those comments.
And Brian has the timeline.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I have Tulsa County's American Rescue Plan Act application. Christina Morrison, their CFO, provided it to me. If anybody would like to look at that.
Well, oddly enough, I was just looking at that one. Is that the $38 million one?
This is specifically just the salaries, and they actually already got the money. They started it in October of 21. They requested $12,012,000. So
yeah, shoot that out. If you send it to me for sure.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay. Am I allowed to send it to you guys as a group?
I would prefer you to send it individually.
Okay, yes. That's why I asked the question.
And after this meeting, if you can get with Accenture and work through those. All right, any other items for the sheriff?
I just want to mention one thing. When I'm talking about minutes and seconds, I know this probably isn't necessarily the case, but if because of COVID, there's policies and procedures that need to be changed, and maybe perchance that change increased efficiency, so doing something different to respond to COVID may actually reduce the amount of time on the stop, but that's completely related to the response to COVID. So that's where I don't think that we can just look at a 20 minutes versus a 30-minute to get to that 50% increase. I think we've got to be looking at other things.
And that's
than
fine.
just
If
that.
it's become more efficient, like that's even better, right? That's great. That is great for the department. It's great for your communities. And we can make those justifications if we can just draw the lines.
And I'm not saying that it has. I'm just saying that's one example of
Sure.
how you can't just look at a minute and second approach.
Yes, and we wouldn't want to disregard those actions. Like those are things that are pliable into these arguments that we're going to make to Treasury.
And to be clear again, we're not looking for minutes, seconds, or even hours. You can make generalizations about this task. So let's put it at 10% or 20%. See how it adds up and get to the 50 plus number that you're looking for, or however it comes out.
Thank you. All right, Jamie, since you won't be here the next time we have a P&G, I'd like to call you to the mic. Did you have some items for your department?
Andrea, thank you for that presentation. It was very good. Sheriff, thank you as well.
I think I actually will be here. Well, August 19th. Isn't there a meeting before then?
Oh, yeah, I stand corrected.
So
But you'll be so short time, you might not even
Won't
remember
care.
we're here.
we're not ready to present our salary reimbursement. We had another conference call meeting yesterday with Stephen and Nicole, and we're working through that process now. And we submitted a premium pay concept a while back, and part of our meeting yesterday was to discuss the spreadsheet we had submitted and how we went about it and what additional things we would need. So we're going to put that together. So we're not ready for that. The only thing that I have left on the list are my transport vehicles, about 113,000, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll need to bring that up on the 16th.
Okay. Then that's all I have.
Well, thank you. Now that I know she's coming back. Jeez. That was a ha-ha for those that didn't know. And then I do know we have an item from purchasing, so I'd like to, I believe her item's under item 8, if we can jump to it real quick. And just some of those concerns that you had earlier today and how to process through that.
Is this a processes question? Then I think we'd be
I'm not
under
sure if it's
item
item
2.
Well, it references projects and programs we're currently undertaking.
There is a particular project that's been approved, and I just had questions on the process in order to move forward with the approved project. So we've had one project with the sheriff's office. If we're on item 8, the HVAC system for the Midwest City Sheriff's Substation. There's just a couple of pieces that I haven't determined if they're complete yet. One being appointing official requisitioning officer, receiving officer, since those cost centers have been created, making sure the appointments are at the right place in order to make encumbrances for those things.
But I think you're talking, what
more
you're
of a
wanting to know is
process
more
of-
of a broad aspect than just that one individual.
Correct.
piece,
This would apply to all projects, even though we do have one that's approved so far.
Okay.
All right, so she's
Both
demanding
items are
that
on the
we
agenda, so-
make sure we have a receiving and who else?
Well,
Your
I-
requisitioning officer.
Requisition
Do we need to
officer.
open item 2 to discuss that?
At this
I don't
point, we're
know.
under item 2.
The question is just having a requisitioning officer and receiving officer. I want to make sure that we have the correct process. It's really important for federal procurement that you just outline your process and where the department involvement applies to that. I have been working with Andrea and other staff to kind of outline that. We've met with Danny Lambert to just make sure that the chart of accounts and the processes match. I don't know if I'm ready to present something to you all today, but I would like to know kind of what your thoughts are on how you foresee, once a project is approved, getting something received, a project installed, who signs the forms, that level of involvement. Since these are federal forms, you want to make sure your department has a role, and I just wanted to see what you all thought on that.
This is different from our receiving and rec officers that we have now. We can't just name the same ones. We
The
need
way
to
you're
name somebody from your office that can oversee all of them. How does
Yeah,
this-
I think the issue is like with CARES, the account, Kelly Thomas is the requisitioning officer. And then for Kelly, the accounts that she's on, she has a couple of receiving officers. But for instance, the sheriff, when they ordered vehicles, the receiving officers, which are actually in your office, they understand that, okay, here's a vehicle that has 4 wheels, 4 tires, and it starts up and runs down the road, but they don't necessarily know that it has all the features that were ordered for the vehicle. So the department needs to be involved at some level on signing off on whether whether it is actually what they were intending to purchase and what we paid for. So it gets a little a little bit cumbersome there. They were utilizing, I believe, two people coming out. The receiving officer associated with the account was receiving it, and they were meeting with somebody from that department at the dealership or wherever to receive it. And I think just having to have everybody mesh their schedules and stuff made it a little bit difficult. Is that correct?
That did happen a couple of times, but we were successful. And having the department and the receiving officer, the BOCC appointed receiving officer, having that present was good. Just making sure we're all on the same page to move forward for ARPA funds. These are different projects. They require different amounts of attention to detail. With your infrastructure projects, there's different milestones, different ways to receive, if you will. And so I want to make sure that as your purchasing agent, I train receiving officers so that I'm communicating the right thing, and also pulling in the department at the level so that it doesn't all fall on one person and that we keep our experts involved.
I would like, with the purchasing department being involved in this for a couple years now because of the CARES purchases, and we've got departments that have been involved with this for a couple years. I think you guys have the firsthand knowledge of what wasn't working, what was working, what kind of tweaks you think might work. I think my personal opinion is it's better for you and those departments to discuss and come up with some potential solutions other than us just coming up with some solutions that,
Right.
I mean, we've not been involved with it on a daily
Right.
basis.
And we're working on that.
Okay, so you were working on it, and then knowing someone might have some time after the 19th, she might be available. All right, with that being said, we'll move on.
Thanks.
And I need to entertain a motion. Oh, no, I'll do it. Motion to recess for 15 minutes.
Is there anything further to discuss? How about that? Because it may be a motion.
Well, at this point, I think all these items in review that haven't been reviewed need to just be moved to our 16 August P&G.
Okay. You still want to recess?
I retract
Motion to
that
adjourn.
motion. I heard a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
I have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you for being here.